If you are a frequent listener to the podcast, you know that we have been sponsored by Fuji Sports for quite some time now. Whether you're looking for apparel, equipment, bags, or accessories, Fuji Sports has got it covered. Go to fujisports.com to see the latest selection of everything you need for your jiu-jitsu, judo, or MMA journey. That's fujisports.com. Let me take a minute to tell you about RŌL TV. If you're looking to take your jiu-jitsu to the next level and supplement your BJJ education, then RŌL TV has you covered. RŌLAcademy.tv has over 1,500 videos covering individual techniques, positions, and concepts, including seminars and workshops with top-level competitors and instructors like Chris Wojcik, Robert Drysdale, Aaron Hurley, Emily Kwok, and more. Whether you are a beginner or a more advanced student, RŌL TV is the online platform that can take your jiu-jitsu to the next level. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other buttons there are, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. This helps us bring you the great guests and amazing content that you've come to expect. On this episode, Thomas's guest James Driskill shares his journey in jiu-jitsu, highlighting the profound influence that Rickson Gracie has had on his life and training. He discusses the evolution of training styles, the importance of fundamentals, and the challenges of modern jiu-jitsu, including the Dunning-Kruger effect and information overload. Here's the RŌL Radio with a Rickson Gracie black belt and a BJJ instructor out of Vero Beach, Florida, James Driskill.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live. James, good to have you on the show. How are you? How's your day going?
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you, Thomas.
We figured out the technology. That seems to be the hardest part behind this podcasting craziness.
Especially for me, I'm getting to that age where the technology doesn't make sense to me anymore. I used to make fun of...
Wait a minute. You are a young stud. Like, why you...
Let me tell you, like, a few weeks ago, I tried to clear up space on my phone and move like 15 years worth of pictures that I'd been storing on my phone to my computer. So I moved them all over and I deleted them off my phone. And then my computer somehow synced with my phone and deleted all my photos from like everywhere, the cloud, all this stuff. I don't know. And I just lost like 15 years of photos because I'm a grandpa.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, but I got this working, so I feel good.
I guess we're going to document your life in that way. And then if anybody wants to know more about you, then there it is.
Somebody has to remember.
Listen, let me ask you right off the bat. I feel like many will consider you a lucky cat. And for those who don't know who you are, and we'll get to that story, but I think what is really interesting that you've been working with, ultimately, the GOAT, the one who started all of this pioneer. Many consider him the best of the best, Rickson Gracie, right? And not only you taught at his school, not only you work with Kron and being close to the family, but also you spent significant amount of time with Rickson himself, especially the last few years. Do you consider yourself a lucky cat?
100%. I'm so blessed and grateful for the opportunities and the people that have had an impact in my life, especially Rickson. A big impact on me.
What is the one thing, like one, and this might be hard, but one thing that you got out of that relationship?
That is hard. That's really hard. So many good things. I suppose I got I guess it's kind of cliche, but I got sort of a sense of calm confidence that I no longer needed to be as maybe confrontational and such as I was when I was a younger guy. And just being around him that simultaneously could empower me to feel stronger than I ever was, and also remind me to stay humble, because this guy could, destroy me in seconds, no problem.
I'm we are laughing and we are smiling about this, but over the decades, because it's not even years, and it's not one decade, but decades, that he's been making impact on jiu-jitsu community and growing jiu-jitsu for what we see today. You've had an opportunity to interact with him one-on-one, not only from a jiu-jitsu perspective, but life lessons and just hang out kind of off the record in a sense. And I'm sure there's many conversations that took place on weekly, if not daily basis between you two. And do you feel like that you're getting more than just jiu-jitsu from him?
100%, especially over the last few years and more recently, and because, as he's said plenty of times, his physicality is fading away, and it's harder for him to express himself through the jiu-jitsu like he used to. And so his kind of focus shifts a bit towards that kind of lifestyle. How can I use the principles and things from jiu-jitsu to benefit my daily life? And I think that's always been a part of his psyche and his daily life. But now that I think his body is not cooperating as much as it used to, he has to focus in more on the things that aren't quite as physical. And a lot of that is the spiritual aspect, the emotional aspect, the way that the lessons of jiu-jitsu have helped him and me, and probably you and all of us who do it, deal with the stresses and trials and tribulations of our daily lives. So I learn a lot watching him go through Parkinson's and, just getting older and all of the injuries that he's accumulated, being the GOAT, and watching him approach all of that, which would make a lot of people probably anxious or nervous or depressed or angry or whatever. And he's just, so stoic about it and so excited for a new challenge to try to overcome and to grow and to learn from this. And that's so inspiring to see that someone who's got such a positive outlook, even in the midst of unfortunate circumstances, that comfort in hell, like he talks about.
Isn't that eye-opening in a sense to you, where one of the best jiu-jitsu fighters, one of the best fighters, I mean, we're talking about pride and others, like he's done so much, right, from a fighting perspective, that after all these years, there's not only wear and tear, there is not only we age and then our bodies, go through changes, unavoidable changes, but also we find ourselves in these situations where, like Parkinson's and his situation, it really puts us in these very vulnerable positions where it's somebody who arguably could fight anybody. Now the simplicity of life puts us in the circumstances where, we no longer can do that, and we feel very vulnerable, very, very weak in a sense. Things are out of our control.
Yeah.
What's your thought on all this?
Just the kind of coming to that age in jiu-jitsu where we start to lose a little bit of what we had. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I think it's all so fascinating, and I think without changes and new trials and difficulties and stuff, maybe it would become a little boring or something. So I find it really inspiring, even myself, as I get older, and I don't really feel like scrambling with 20-something-year-olds anymore, and trying to do everything I can not to give up the sweep or whatever it might be. I find it so much more interesting to look for all the ways that I can accomplish whatever I'm trying to do when I'm fighting or rolling or training or whatever with the least amount of effort possible. And so, a lot of times that'll translate to some blue belt kind of passing my guard and putting me in a bad spot or something. And that's totally fine, because the opportunity for me to discover through just trial and error in the moment, moment to moment, these second by second little exchanges that I can have with anybody, You can discover, if you're really paying attention, all kinds of cool, new, unique little details that maybe you learned somewhere before, but now it just clicked, or maybe you just discovered no one's ever showed you that before, but now you're kind of like, oh, that seems like it goes well here. Sometimes I describe it to my students as like I'm dealing with some problem. Let's say some big guy's got me stuck in side control, and I'm just kind of walking down the hallway checking doors, and I'm checking each door handle to see if it's locked. And if it's locked, I'm not going to try to turn it harder. I'm not trying to shoulder or kick it open. I'm just going to keep checking doors, because I feel like I've never found an opponent or a partner where I couldn't find some kind of easy way out. Of course, when I was younger, I could find multiple ways out, some of them being harder than others. And I think a lot of people, when we're young and when our bodies are more resilient and we're strong, we're fast, and we don't take so long to recover from injuries and such, we can kind of burst out of things and then forget that we ever did that and sweep that under the rug, which is why I'm a huge proponent of flow rolling, just like rolling slowly and, not necessarily giving things up, but also I'm not making any like strong muscle contractions when I'm flow rolling. I'm not using.
So let me pick your brain on this, because I mean, there's thousands of people listening to this, and they're gonna be like, "Well, hold on, this is the biggest nonsense in the world. Like, we are supposed to be fighting. That's number one. Number two, I'm supposed to, pose my own will onto you as my partner, as my opponent, right? I'm supposed to execute my own plan, and turning a knob for each door and see if it works. It might appear very counterproductive to what some might see as fighting or jiu-jitsu might be. You're talking about complete opposite.
I think that training style of I'm going to impose my will, I'm going to give you nothing, I'm going to submit everybody as many times as I can, within the round, and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff is great and is very useful. But I feel like its usefulness pales in comparison to the flow rolling, because if you and I go and have like a roll where people are watching and we both want to kind of look good, at the end of 5 minutes or something, if somebody came up and said, "What happened during your roll?" we both might be like, "Oh shit, I think maybe you swept me. I think there was a guard pass in there, maybe." It's hard to recall, and I think that's a big opportunity cost for a lot of people, especially when they're learning. In that, if you slow it down and you can really kind of recall all the things that happened during that exchange, because there were fewer of them, because you're going slower, and because it's less chaotic because you're going slower, you can kind of keep tabs on some of the maybe mistakes that were made, or maybe novel problems that someone gave to you that you didn't really understand what to deal with. And in the midst of our hard training, I would just deal with that with my physicality. I would just deal with it however I could and then move on and then sweep it under the rug. And I never really get a chance to analyze, unless I'm filming this, what happened in that moment when my heart rate had to jump from zone 2 to zone 4 for about 10 seconds or so. That wasn't the most efficient jiu-jitsu I was using right there. So maybe I could win the round, maybe I can get the pass, maybe I can get the sweep, but in the grand scheme, how much better did I get? My ego might be feeling pretty nice that I was able to accomplish something in front of everybody watching, but if Rickson was watching, he'd be like, "Yeah, you passed his guard and you submitted him, but look, your face is completely red, you're exhausted, like you ready to go another round right now?" I'm like, "Oh, I need to catch my breath."
So let me ask you, James. So how come, if this is so simple, how come most people don't think that way? How come most people don't do it that way? I mean, almost any time I watch students, especially at the very beginning of our journey, we are very physical. We are very, almost insecure in that sense.
You have no choice, in the beginning, because you don't have any other tools. Your only tools in the beginning are your strength and your speed or your weight or whatever it might be that you might naturally possess. God forbid you're a 90-pound, 50-year-old woman. Then those people have the worst time, in the beginning of jiu-jitsu, because they're just stuck under side control every class, all day, every day.
Yeah.
So I'm really big into helping those kind of people that don't have a lot of physical gifts and such, or they've maybe waned over time, helping them find much easier ways to deal with the major problems that we deal with. Obviously there's a infinite amount of problems that people can give to us, especially when we get to our level, and we've studied this for so long. But if we bring it back to, this was originally a martial art and supposed to keep us safe, there's really a small number of moves, I think, that we need to be masterful at to feel confident that at least I can remain safe. At least my student can flee. They can keep from absorbing too much damage and get away, break grips, all this kind of stuff. Get up off the ground, get out from under these pens and stuff. And, the rest of it, it's fun. And I like it. And I enjoy doing weird, flippy, turny, upside down stuff, and it keeps the monotony out when you're training every day, all the time. But I also see it as a big opportunity cost every time I practice that, Kiss of the Dragon or whatever it is. That's cool. And it works great. And it's fun. And it's crowd pleasing. I'm not practicing dodging that guy's punch as I'm underneath him, as I try to move around, and as I play this game, which is, again, super fun. I love the game, but it is a game. And if I want to practice fighting, I need to make sure that I'm not getting too far in the weeds with the 10th recounter for this crazy leg entanglement or something, that no real street fighting encounter is ever going to go down that road, unless just by chance I get into a fight with some other black belt, which probably 30 seconds of the fight we'll both be like, wait a second, you train? And we become friends.
That is true. How many times does that happen, right? You just mentioned something very interesting. In almost one sentence, you said infinite amount of problems, but then you said very small part of techniques that would keep us safe. It almost sounds like an oxymoron in a sense of, well, which one is it? Is it an infinite?
I think it's like the 80-20 rule. I don't know if you've heard of the 80-20 thing, and I'm not quite sure I even fully understand it, but it's like 80% of the stuff that happens is like, 20% of these moves that we're dealing with. And I'd say it's probably even bigger. Like maybe if you think of all the jiu-jitsu moves, probably like 5% or something that we really need to be super sharp in order to feel like at least I have a chance.
Do you think that's the case? Do you think that's the case as far as students' knowledge? Do we really focus on 5%, or the distraction point is so high that? I guess what I'm trying to say is, how can we focus on all this stuff that is really less important?
I think people are just kind of maybe a little misguided. They mean well, but I see it a lot, especially as I've gone around the world teaching at different schools and teaching seminars and stuff. The happening of the new black belt teacher, and the new black belt teacher, or even the brown belt teacher or whatever, they get the chance to teach class, and they are so excited because they know so much cool stuff that they want to share with these students. And they can't decide what's the thing that they're going to teach. And so they teach 40 things, in the class, and nobody gets any of it. And it's all just this seminar of, look how much cool stuff I know, nothing to do with, let me help you, my student, understand something conceptually deeply so that you can apply it to many aspects of your jiu-jitsu. Instead, it's, here's some really cool, flashy thing that you won't be able to do, but you'll think that I'm really cool for showing it to you. And I think it gets lost a bit there, where people are just kind of regurgitating whatever they were taught. And a lot of times, not only are students not, in my opinion, focusing on the proper techniques to begin with, but they'll go years before ever being introduced to them or even seeing them at all. And you've probably seen this. And I know my, training buddies and stuff see this as they go around, and people are, constantly, hey, why didn't anybody ever show me this super simple thing to keep me safe in the mount or in side control, and yet I know 3 variations of a flying armbar.
You know, it's so interesting that you mentioned all of this. I recently had Henry Atkins at my academy. He did a phenomenal seminar, and
One of my old teachers.
yeah, and you know, first of all, I love attending seminars because I love to sit back and just watch the instructor, watch the chemistry, watch the little things that typically I do, but now I'm the student, right? And there was not any different with Henry, and we shout out to Henry, by the way. And you know, I sat back and I was watching, and then I had obviously many conversations with all my students after the event, and the consensus was very simple. He really didn't teach anything new, yet everything he taught changed everything. And it was almost like we didn't learn anything, yet our jiu-jitsu has changed significantly just from space management and just little turns, little this, like it's just such an amount of details. It was just simply mind-blowing. And I think this is what you're describing as, instead of learning, I feel like if we are not flying or inverting these days, like it's just not happening. I think that that's the general consensus in jiu-jitsu. Like it has to be flashy, it has to be big, but there are so many little things that happens under the hood that we underestimate.
This is, I think, super common amongst any practitioner of any activity, in that the ones that spend a lot of time mastering the fundamentals can show you something like an UPA, a bridge, a trap and roll, or whatever you call it. Mm-hmm. And we all learned that in the first week of training. But those of us that have spent years and years and years and years and years battle testing those types of movements against all different body types and strengths and ages and belt colors and all the stuff, we can, someone like Henry, he can give you almost an infinite number of details about these movements. And the average person, they spend some time on that, and then they have mixed results with it. And so they learn another thing that goes along with it. And so when that fails them, they can resort to this next thing. And then if that fails, they have this next thing. And so they have to learn 10 movements in a sequence to deal with the inevitable failure of the first few in the sequence. Whereas people like Rickson or Henry or me or the Rickson guys that you've talked to, we're just going to try and make that first move work, and know it so deeply that it's not that I need a completely different technique. It's just that technique itself needs to be modified slightly. And in the understanding of how to modify that, I think you can be taught that. Someone can tell you, 1,000 different ways to create variation in some move, or you can just learn these concepts that Rickson gives to us and kind of apply them to novel scenarios moment to moment, because your understanding is so much more conceptual than memorizing 5 billion different techniques. I mean, I don't know about you, but I imagine we probably know tens of thousands of techniques floating around in our head. And some of those are just variations, but it's probably 100 techniques that I would draw on if some 7-foot tall, tweaked out, crazy person broke through my sliding glass door right now and started trying to bite me. There's like maybe 100 techniques that I would draw from in that scenario, and I would feel perfectly safe and comfortable in that situation.
Probably, if we took this even deeper, this probably boils down to maybe a dozen of concepts or principles that those 100 techniques boil down to. Like if you look at the common denominators, if you will, or common things between all of them, it really boils down to just very few things, right?
And if I try to make that as few as possible, I would say that's probably breathing, because I need to make sure that my gas tank lasts longer than his, or at least doesn't run out before his does. And it's base, I need to make sure that I keep my balance and I disrupt his. And it's connection, which I think is a pretty tricky subject for a lot of newcomers to understand. It's leverage. Understanding leverage is pretty easy to demonstrate, I think, and things like timing. You boil that down and apply those concepts to almost any technique or situation, and I think you can find improvement pretty quickly.
Well, and I asked this already, but
Hi,
I'm going to ask you again in the context. First of all, do you have a dog right behind you?
Yeah, two of them. There's one behind me, and there's
I
just
see
jumped
this
up.
guy. I didn't notice that he's sitting right behind your shoulder until this moment he moved his ear. And
They're both girls.
there you
That's
go.
Peanut, and this is Jelly.
Well,
That's
Jelly
really
and Peanut,
peanut
welcome to
butter
the
and
show.
jelly.
There, I love it. And so I asked you this a few minutes ago, but I'll ask one more time in the context that what we are talking about. Why do we make this so complicated? I feel like longer I train, longer I've been on the mat, I'm trying to simplify jiu-jitsu versus when I watch individuals who start, but maybe just at the beginning of their journey, first few years, I feel like we are really overcomplicating things. And I don't find myself as the smartest guy. Say again?
I was just going to say, I think it's really fun to learn new things. And I find myself, I've found myself in the past getting really bored of jiu-jitsu. Like, okay, here I go again. Like, I'm going to upa and then pass your guard and then get in side control and then mount and then cross choke. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's, I'm like, not having the greatest time. I'm starting to daydream, which is not what this is about. This is supposed to be a forced meditation. And it's no longer challenging enough. So it's like, how can I find a little bit more entertainment while I'm doing this? And, this is from time to time. Of course, not every session. Most sessions I'm following the 80-20 rule. But I think it's fun to learn new things. And I think it's also very enticing, especially for the newer student, to learn these tricks. And you learn a trick, or something that your fellow students don't know, and they don't have the conceptual understanding of something like base, leverage, connection, timing, breath to deal with it. And you find instant success with some kiss of the dragon technique. Now you're on everybody's back all the time. It's like, fuck, that's amazing. Of course I'm going to implement that into my game. I'm taking everybody's back. This is amazing. And then the problem is you try that on somebody who does have a really good understanding of these fundamentals of controlling the middle, like Rickson talks about all the time, and of kind of using your base and your pressure and your leverage and your connection and these things to shut those sort of things down without even knowing what they are. Then suddenly you realize, damn, I invested a lot of my chips into learning these tricks, and the tricks don't work on anybody but the easily tricked. And that's kind of a bummer, I think, for a lot of people to find that out later. Like, oh man, this guy none of my tricks work on him. I need to go back to basics.
So would you describe jiu-jitsu as easy or as complicated? From one side, we say it's really simple. Like, it just boils down to these 5 things that you just mentioned a second ago. But from the other side, nobody wants to listen to those 5 things, and everybody overcomplicates things. So how come nobody? First of all, let's get this out of the way. How come nobody's listening to their instructor? How come nobody's listening to their instructors? Is
it? I think they have these days 1,000 instructors too. It's like, yeah, you have your instructor, but most of these guys are on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, and they've got 40 different instructors they're watching there too, and they're all saying different stuff, and they've all got different philosophies, and they're pulled in many directions, and it's hard to know exactly what the right thing is with so much information out there. There's so much technique and philosophy and stuff about everything, including jiu-jitsu out there. It can pull you in a lot of different directions, and I'm sure it's extremely confusing for your average beginner coming into this, looking at all that. I saw a video. It was it was demonstrating. Imagine I'm in your closed guard, and you come up and you double underhook hug me under my armpits, and you pull me forward So now I'm kind of facing down towards you, and I choose to make an overhook over your underhook. And the video was how to counter that overhook. And it had these couple of techniques. You could do like a sweep, or you could go to the back, and all that, depending on if you post his arm. And I'm sitting there looking at this like there's a bunch of students that are going to go waste their time practicing this nonsense when only white belt, beginners who don't know any better are ever going to make that overhook. Nobody is ever going to do that more than a few times, because you're just going to get your back taken or swept every single time. You're going to get choked. It's just not good technique. It's not good strategy. And so therefore the bottom person's technique that was being demonstrated is a technique to be used on idiots. And I just don't really want to spend my time learning techniques that only work on idiots. I want to spend my time learning techniques that'll work on any body, any size, any gender, any weight, whatever, all the stuff. I want my techniques to be as universal as possible so that I don't have to know so many, and so that I can find mastery in a smaller number rather than this sort of mediocrity and all of them.
Yeah. So how come not everybody's thinking the same way?
I guess it's just maybe a symptom of our culture, and we're all kind of scrolling and spending 3 or 5 seconds looking at something and then on to the next. It's our dopamine levels need recharging constantly. So.
Yeah. And that would appear to be completely opposite of what really jiu-jitsu needs, isn't it? I mean, the quick dopamine rush, or let me scroll through these 75 things in 3 seconds. That's completely opposite of what we need to do in order for us to achieve some kind of understanding. I'm not even talking about mastery, but some kind of understanding of jiu-jitsu as principles, isn't it?
Yeah, I think people, they're searching for fun. They're searching for more skill and understanding, and they're searching for ways to even just playfully beat their friend in class and whatever. And I think if they were to spend more time challenging themselves with fundamental techniques, meaning for a lot of people it would be handicapping themselves. So, okay, I understand how to do an elbow escape. Can I do it holding my belt with one hand? Can I do it with my eyes closed? Can I do it while holding my breath? Like, there's different ways that we can challenge ourselves to create more difficulty, to maybe take away some of the monotony of doing these same moves over and over, and also at the same time build our resilience and our ability to do these techniques under pressure. Because I guess for me, it's like I want to make sure that my students, at least the ones that say they're there for self-defense, to feel like they are confident in the world, I want them to feel like they can really, if they really think about someone mounted on them, just raging, like so angry, they want to hurt you really bad, and they are frothing at the mouth and giving you so much violence and hatred. This is so jarring for people who've never experienced that. And I'd like more people to try to think about that and even find ways to slowly incorporate that level of violence into the fundamentals in a very safe way that's progressive. So we start exactly where it's tolerable, and then we move on from there. We don't go faster than the student can tolerate, because then they're just going to quit. But we can give a lot of confidence in these small handful of save your life movements. We just got to spend time with them.
Well, let me ask you this, James. Have you ever thought about the fact that maybe you and Chris Burns and Jack and perhaps even me, I don't know, and a handful of others out there, we are kind of just really obsessed with this jiu-jitsu to the point where we're seeking something much deeper than 99% of population is seeking in this jiu-jitsu. I mean, I can't
Totally.
help myself to notice that even like in my academy, students come in and some of them, they just want to have fun. They just want to hang out. They want to bump and slap and beat the crap out of each other, for the lack of better terms,
And that's
and they
totally
are really
fine.
not, and they are really not interested in that level of detail.
Yeah, that's totally fine. It's just like if I go play basketball, like I'm having a great time and this is fun. I don't know anything about basketball technique. And I'm not really interested in learning about basketball technique, but I will go and dribble a ball around terribly and miss shots and have fun with my friends. And I used to even be able to dunk. I could, well, not a women's ball. I can't palm a man's ball, but tennis ball, I can still dunk. But, like, why don't I go and learn all of the details of how to shoot free throws better and what's the proper technique to release the ball when I shoot, and the best ways to dribble and foot quickness drills, because I don't give a shit. Like, I'm doing it for fun. And I get that a lot of people don't give a shit and they're just coming to jiu-jitsu for fun, and it's fun for them and that's enough for them, and that's totally fine. And that's why I'm glad that the game of sport jiu-jitsu does exist, because it gives a lot of people something to do that's, I don't know to say it's good for your body, but it's good for the mind, it's good for the soul. It gives you community and connection to people, and it gets you out of the house if that's something that you need. And I think it's great as long as those people really truly understand, and hopefully their instructors aren't misguiding them into thinking they're learning how to fight. Of course, they're going to be better fighters than they would have been without playing the game of sport jiu-jitsu, but there's jiu-jitsu and then there's jiu-jitsu while being punched in the face. It's one of my favorite quotes. Those are two very different experiences.
Yeah, I agree. Do you feel like the baton has been passed to you from Rickson? Do you feel like you are responsible for where this is going in a sense? I mean, it's not a secret that we all have expiration date, and at some point these OGs are gonna start fading away, and hopefully it's not anytime soon. This is not where I'm going with this, but there's one certain thing in life, is that we all have an end date at some point, and you are gaining all this knowledge directly from the source. Do you feel responsible for pass this on in a specific way so it doesn't disappear and gets diluted or taught differently?
I don't feel solely responsible or anything like this. There's a lot of guys that are great that have learned from Rickson, some of them you mentioned. And I think between all of us, his beautiful invisible jiu-jitsu will be preserved. And I feel a drive and I feel a passion to share his jiu-jitsu, especially with people who are smaller, weaker, less athletic, because that's really the people that need it the most. And the ones that are really athletic, they could probably just kind of, they'd probably be fine. Like, they could probably run away, they could probably flail and break a grip or something. But the weakest ones, that's who Rickson and I are really, and the rest of Rickson's guys, we're really focused on reaching out and helping them find confidence, not only in their ability to defend themselves, but also learning more about healthy lifestyle. So learning to breathe properly. I mean, Rickson's a huge proponent of breath as a tool, and me too. And there's so many different ways to use your breath to improve yourself. And so I feel a passion to help those people, and I love teaching, and nothing makes me feel more alive and present than teaching people, and especially when it's really meaningful for them and changes their lives and makes them feel happier, more confident and whatnot. So I don't know if it's a responsibility as much as an honor and a gift and a passion that I get to share this stuff, and that I got to learn these things from the Grandmaster and the greatest of all time. And not only the techniques, but the philosophy behind them, the mindset of how he created them. And just his kind of general calmness in the world inspires me.
Well, let's take this back a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning of James, if you will. Do you remember your very first day on the mat?
Not really. I think it might have been, well, okay. My first day on the mat at Rickson's, kinda. My first day on the mat in general, I got beat up because I wasn't I didn't have a lot of faith in jiu-jitsu back when I was younger.
Do talk about
So-
that, because I think that's a very common experience. Matter of fact, I would say 90% of the guests that I speak with on the show is literally have the same story. Like, I thought this was the biggest fluke. Like, I even remember I had Chris Howder on the show, and he's like, "Yeah, no, this is the biggest bullshit in the world." And then you get slapped a couple times, and then it's like, "What the hell is going on here?" So. What was your experience like for the, unbeliever that James was prior to this huge experience?
I did a lot of striking before I found jiu-jitsu, and I grew up in Texas, and when I was a teenager, I met a friend of a friend, and he was a martial artist, and I had been doing martial arts when I was younger, but I'd kind of taken a break to be a little bit of a shithead when I was a teenager and, party and do drugs and stuff like that. And I met this guy in the midst of, this like dark place that I was going through, cigarettes and staying up late and all this stuff and drinking and whatever. And this guy reignited my passion for martial arts and for training and such. And so we would get together all the time and watch an episode of Dragon Ball Z and then go out in the parking lot and put pads on and beat the crap out of each other. And that was kind of our daily routine. And we got kind of confident and cocky in how tough we were. So we started kind of dojo storming back in
what year is this?
I'm trying to think, is this maybe like the early 2000s? So yeah, maybe like the first half of the 2000s or something, around somewhere in there. I'm not great with timelines, but so we were very respectful about it. We didn't just go in and talk shit or anything, but we would go to kung fu schools and karate schools and taekwondo schools and whatnot, and we would respectfully ask if they would like to spar. And most places would turn us down, and every once in a while they would accept. And a couple of times, me and my buddy got beat up pretty bad. And one of those was at a jiu-jitsu place. Another one was at a kung fu school. Dude almost knocked my teeth out with a craziest fucking heel kick.
Just so we got this story straight. So, like, you were that guy who did challenge matches.
I know. It's such a douchey thing to think about going back. I am very proud that I was respectful about it, and I didn't come in, if they declined, then I was like, oh, no problem, and we would leave peacefully and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, we were definitely a little douchey like that.
Talk to me about the jiu-jitsu place. You go in, challenge match. I don't even remember
what kind of jiu-jitsu place it was. It was like just some nobody that probably doesn't even do jiu-jitsu anymore, just totally handed me my ass. And my friend didn't even go because he saw what happened to me. He's like, oh, okay, we need to practice this stuff.
Walk me through that day. Like, you going in, you getting through the door. Where's your confidence? Like, are you thinking that you're going to mop the floors with them?
I don't remember, but I probably was pretty confident. I think I was pretty cocky when I was a teenager and thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof and all this kind of stuff. And, and I was made out of rubber bands, so it was hard to get hurt seriously or anything. So it was more just like a fun challenge. And we were so used to beating the crap out of each other that we weren't really super worried about any beatings that we were going to take. But I was just so impressed with the ease at which this guy dispatched me. And I wish I knew who he was or what team it was. Or I mean, there were teams back then, but I think I squared off, and I, kind of knew he wanted to clinch with me a bit. So I was keeping some distance, and he just timed it so perfectly as he kind of feinted with some jab or something like that. And I went to counter, and he was underneath me and picking me up, and I was on my back, and then, made the classic mistake of turning my back and gave him my back, and he choked me, and I think he put me to sleep too. I'm pretty sure. And my friend was just like, no. I don't know.
So what are you thinking of? First of all, do you know what jiu-jitsu is when this happens, or are you completely oblivious to?
I know what it is, but not really. I know it's like kind of ground wrestling with submissions, and that's pretty much it.
So is this your turning point? Is like, wait a minute, what the hell was this? Or are you still thinking that you can beat them, that you're superior to this?
This was a point where the seed was planted. I wasn't ready yet to study it, and I don't even know. Like, I don't think that school was anywhere nearby. I think we had to travel quite far to go find that place. And so I don't think it was really convenient. And I think also I was just getting ready to embark on a trip to California, like to move there. And I was just kind of lucky that when I was living in California, I had a good friend who was older than me, who was a big fan of Rickson, and he told me about him. And I think I was homeless at the time, actually, in California. And my friend told me about Rickson, and another friend of mine paid for my first month to join Rickson's school. And I fell in love immediately, not only with the technique, but with Rickson. And I think he saw me as this, young guy who was on hard times and didn't really have a lot and needed this kind of thing. And so he sort of took me under his wing, if you will. And he didn't charge me for my tuition at the school. Instead, I would come over to his house from time to time and help him do stuff around the house, fix things, yard work, whatever kind of thing. And then he would give me little lessons in the garage. And, I'm a white belt. I don't really understand the value that I'm getting in this exchange. He probably gave me tens of thousands of dollars or something worth of free private lessons in the garage in exchange for, whatever nonsense, busy work around the house or something, as well as the tuition at the school. So, I've always felt a real strong loyalty to him for kind of pulling me up out of an abyss of darkness that I was, homeless, maybe on the verge of having issues with drugs again, like kind of aimless. And suddenly here is this guy who gives me a gi and some things to work on, and this fun practice that's filling a hole in my psyche, I think, that I'd had for a long time of I'm vulnerable, I'm weak, I'm incompetent, whatever, all the stuff that our minds can tell us, especially when we're younger and we're insecure. And he kind of filled that stuff with, no, I'm capable, and I'm not made out of glass, and I can do hard things, and these people care about me and my progress. And I guess, probably the community of it that saved me quite a bit. The jiu-jitsu community, making all those friends, and we all have this common goal, and we all care about each other's success, and we're pushing each other harder and harder. And I'm very grateful to him for giving me that opportunity that, maybe I wouldn't have been able to continue. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any place to live or anything. So once I started the jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, maybe it's the forced meditation aspect of it or something, but I started getting my shit together. I had more drive and more ambition, and started my own company, and really kind of did really well in competitions, boxes and boxes full of all the gold medals and belts and trophies and swords and shit they give us. And then I found teaching, and when Rickson gave me the opportunity to teach, it was first with the kids class, and I really had a great time teaching them, especially watching kids, they come in, they're so shy and so timid and so unsure of themselves. And after a few weeks, they've got all these friends and they feel really confident and they're bouncing around and they're super outgoing and, their charisma is starting to supercharge. And it's just so awesome to see that. And then it was filling in for maybe Henry or Shane or somebody or Rickson or whoever, if they couldn't make it to teach a class they were supposed to. And I've just loved it so much, the teaching aspect. And I think, I might have some undiagnosed OCD, ADHD, something, right? Whatever like that. So it was intolerable for me, for someone to ask me a question and for me to not know the answer. And I think that sort of psychosomatic sickness that I had then sort of was a catalyst to help me learn jiu-jitsu in such a deep, maybe deeper way than the average practitioner, because I wanted to be able to make those students smile because I knew the answer. I wanted them to be impressed because I know the answer. And I wanted them to go, wow, when I show them something that immediately counters or disrupts whatever problem that they were going through. So I don't know. I got off on a rant there. I forgot what we were talking about.
This is the best part of that show, when I stay quiet and you tell the story. Well, there was no denial that you might be the luckiest cat out there. I mean, you're not only talking about opportunities of learning from Rickson, but you're talking about a big part of your life being spent next to him and learning from him firsthand, and then having these opportunities. Have you ever thought about what would happen if he didn't ask you to do the chores around the house? Or what would happen if you said no? Or what would happen if your path slightly took a different turn? Where would you be now?
Huh. That's a tough question that probably has a dark answer. It's like, I'd say there's a good chance that I would be prison or dead or something like that, maybe.
Would you say that changed your life or kept your life in a bright spot?
100%. And it hasn't all been bright, of course, but I think if I think about my life without jiu-jitsu versus with, I don't know. I mean, anything's possible, but I see that probably that path being a lot more difficult, filled with a lot more trauma and suffering for myself and others. And not because I'm some powerful, dangerous, whatever, but just because I was young and had a lot of trauma and had a chip on my shoulder. And I think I was dangerous in that way. And I think a lot of that melted away once I had this outlet where I could express the anger that I had inside in a way that wasn't destructive, at least not to anybody but myself so much. I'm a little banged up.
Yeah, well, I think we all a little banged up. I do believe that we all a little crazy.
The gentle art, huh?
The gentle art.
Crock of shit.
Look, I literally say this to my students all the time. It is gentle art, just for the other guy, okay? It's not gentle to you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, my wife will tell you stories. She's seen me have to use jiu-jitsu, in a self-defense kind of street scenario, and she's just funny. She'll tell people like, and then he took him down, then he got on his back, and then he put him in a choke, and he started saying, "Are you going to calm down? You better calm down. I don't want to hurt you." But she's just like bragging about all this stuff. And I'm like, that's so cute. But I think you're right. It's gentle for the other guy.
Yeah, certainly is.
It can be.
So a long path, a long life. I feel like you've accomplished a lot positive for yourself through this guidance and opportunity that many would dream of, and you had it right at your fingertips. It was right in front of you, and you made the right choices to follow it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think I had a bit of a karmic debt from my early life, and I think, Rickson and the whole team there, that experience gave me the opportunity and the tools to pay off that debt. And so now I feel like as many things that I did when I was younger that maybe that I, I'm not proud of, by this time I've paid those back in full plus more. And that feels good to feel like now I'm just building good karma for later.
Do you feel like that you owe them anything?
Oh, who? Oh,
Rickson, the team?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Rickson and I will owe him forever because, like we just talked about, I can't imagine what my life would have been like if he hadn't come into it. And even though, we weren't together for this whole 20-something year span, he went back to Brazil to kind of heal for a while. And so I would see him from time to time when he would come back, and I visited him in Brazil. But there's years where we didn't really see each other very often. It was more me and Crone or me and some of the other guys kind of running the school and teaching the classes and doing all of our training and things. But I will always feel grateful and blessed to Rickson for giving me this skill set as well as the philosophy behind his kind of lifestyle in Bushido. And
so while he was gone and you don't have that personal one-on-one and you hang out with Crone, do you feel like that's an extension of Rickson, or is that very different?
Yeah, of course, Crone's an extension of Rickson. I mean, he's his son, and they're similar in a lot of ways, but Crone's also super different. And I learned a lot from Crone, and he's got incredible jiu-jitsu, just like his dad. And I think it's a shame that it hasn't shown up in his recent fights as much. But he and I had kind of a falling out and, difficult time. So we don't really talk too much anymore, which I think is a story that's so common in the jiu-jitsu world. That's pretty sad.
Why do you think that is? And I'm not referring to your relationship with him, but the falling out part, I think that's visible so frequently these days. People
I think it happens a lot with black belt students and their black belt instructor. Like I think to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu, like you said, you have to be kind of a little crazy, and maybe have to have a bigger ego, and maybe have to have a little bit of kind of an alpha mindset or whatever, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. And I think these can clash sometimes. And, I think when Crone and I clashed, we were both just strong alpha type ego characters, kind of bashing into each other. And it was just at a moment in time where he had plenty of friends and plenty of what I would say sycophants, people that were just kind of telling him he's great. And it was sort of easy to just kind of be rid of this one that's just chirping in my ear and not saying the things that I want to hear and stuff. So
yeah,
that's tough.
Yeah, it always is, especially if those good relationships.
I love him like a little brother, and I'll always care about him. But maybe one day we'll reconnect. I hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. Do you remember the day you got your black belt?
Yep, I do.
What did that mean to you?
I think it meant maybe more than I felt in the moment or something. I think it's just recognition of a lifetime, almost a long time of really hard work and dedication, and of a skill set that's learned. And I guess it meant, that's a hard question. I don't know. It meant that
What do you mean that it meant less at the moment than what you feel now?
I guess because there wasn't much ceremony to it. It was just kind of like, oh, here, wear this kind of thing.
Walk me through that.
So it was essentially what were we doing? Crone and I went to the Gracie Academy to film something, maybe with Halleck or somebody. I don't even remember what it was. We were filming something, and Crone and I were in the dressing room getting changed for the filming, and he just kind of gave me one of his black belts and said, "Here, wear this." And I was like, "Wait, just for the film, or like from now on?" He's like, "No, yeah, just you're black belt now." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then we put it on and went to go film the thing, and then he was like, go buy a belt, and when you do, give me mine back." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And that was kind of the same way Crone gave me the purple belt when we were out slacklining at the beach. And he just kind of was like, "Go buy a purple belt and wear it to class tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool."
All right, hold on a second. I need to process this. That's number one. But arguably one of the most important moments in one's jiu-jitsu journey, right? We have like all these milestones. I feel like blue belt oftentimes is the first major recognition, especially these days. But then black belt is arguably the big point where many don't achieve, right? And I don't know what the statistics are, but I mean it's pretty ridiculous, out of the amount of people who train to the amount of people who do achieve the black belt. And yet you are describing this one. You are laughing about it. It's in a way of amusing story. But do you feel? Well, let me ask you then. Why such a casual approach to this? Why there isn't a celebration? Why there isn't I
think Crone and I were really close at the time, and we're like brothers, and I think it was just felt natural, I guess, and didn't need to have an audience or anything. And I think also, I mean, Rickson and his team, we just never really put a lot of importance on the belt anyway. And it's probably like this at other schools, but there was always this running joke, like if you were to ask Rickson if you're ready for the next belt, or when you're going to get the next belt, he would quietly add 6 months to whatever that was. And it's like, you don't ask about that. And it was so much more valuable to be tapping out higher belts than it was to, be struggling with them. So it's not something that I think a lot of us guys who are really close really even put a lot of importance in, except maybe like, oh, I want to go compete at the next level or something because I've won like 40 tournaments or something, blue or purple or whatever. And so the challenge of that, but there's still plenty of challenge in class, just rolling with Crone or Henry or Kevin or any of the guys that were gnarly there.
Are you saying that belt is less relevant than majority people make it seem like?
I'm saying that if I walk into some Sambo school and wear a white belt and fuck up several of their guys, like I don't care that I'm wearing a white belt. Everybody sees me just fucking up their guys, or whatever. I go to jiu-jitsu school and I'm wearing a blue belt, or even worse, if I go to jiu-jitsu school and some blue belt smashes me, I feel a little bit self-conscious about wearing this black belt now. Like, why would I want some belt that I haven't earned and that I can't carry? I don't understand why anyone would want that. I would be embarrassed if I wasn't representing my belt color.
So why do you think so many people chase that color?
I think because they just want the reward. They don't want to do the work, and they don't even really understand what the reward represents. It's, again, chasing that dopamine high.
Do you think that's common these days in jiu-jitsu community?
I think it's common in every community.
Yeah. So after all these years, you decide to move to Florida. You pick up your entire life. You pick up your family, they have the whole thing, whole shebang, boom. And we are going to Florida because Rickson asked you.
Yep.
Are you crazy?
I maybe he's crazy. I don't know why he picked me. There's
Why did he pick you?
I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of guys that are better than me. So
You never asked him?
No, I'm afraid. maybe he'll choose that moment to say, actually,
on the second thought,
this other guy.
I made a mistake. I didn't want to tell you.
I'm glad you asked, James, because
we need to make some changes.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I can think of a couple of handfuls of guys that would fulfill this role just as well as me, so I'm very grateful and feel very blessed that
how did that conversation go?
We had not really seen each other in person for a couple of years or something until maybe last summer or maybe last spring. And I called him because I had like some opportunity for like a documentary or something. Some producer was asking for his contact. So I was calling him to ask him if I could give his contact. And we started chatting, and I was like, hey, we should get together. And he's like, come for a lesson. So I grabbed one of my buddies, Jonah Joyce, who's another black belt, Rickson disciple. And we went and did a lesson with him, spent maybe 3 or 4 hours or something with him in his studio there in LA, and had a great time and chatted for a while afterwards. And then I went home, and I lived like 2 hours away in Santa Barbara at the time. And he called me a few days later and basically asked if I would be interested in coming to all of his classes, all of his lessons, little small groups and private lessons and stuff he was teaching there in LA, and sort of learning again kind of what he's doing these days, because it's been a while since we trained together, as well as assist him, teaching some of these guys, because as we talked about earlier, his physicality getting a little bit diminished. Some of the techniques are a little bit more difficult to demonstrate. Maybe it's hard for him. At that time he was getting ready for hip replacement, and so mobility was a little bit off. So I was like, yeah, I'll come down as much as I can. It's a pretty hefty drive, but I started going down maybe a couple of times, 2-3 times a week, assisting him with lessons and stuff. And then, that went really well. And he basically told me, hey, we're going to move to Florida. Would you be interested in coming there and continuing to help me? And maybe we can do some other stuff here when we get settled. And I said, yeah, I think that would be great. Let me talk to my wife. And my wife was open to it. I think it was just pretty serendipitous and good timing, because my wife and I had moved from LA to Oregon in 2016 so I could start a commercial cannabis farm and another company that served like probiotics for cannabis plants or any plants. And so we spent like 6 years up there until her mom got really ill. And so we kind of got rid of the cannabis businesses, and I moved her back to her mom's place near Santa Barbara so my wife could spend the last bit of time with her mom as she was passing. And that town is a really small town near Santa Barbara called Santa Ynez, of like 6,000 people or 10,000 people, really tiny. And I think my wife is just bored out of her mind there with nothing to do. And so she was like, yeah, sure, I'll go anywhere. Like, where are we going?
You're the hero, right?
Yeah. So I was just, lucky. It all kind of worked out. Like you said, I'm a lucky guy. I think if I were an X-Men, my superpower would be luck.
Is it? Would it be? Do you think that things happen for a reason in our life?
I think you can look at it that way, and I think that's often a great way to look at it, but objectively, I have no idea.
Well, I'm just listening to your story for the last hour or so, and one, it seems like there is a certain level of randomness, and if you will, with the way how things unfold. And yet it seems like it was all pre-planned, or it was meant to be. You go through some dark sides, and then, jiu-jitsu comes along, and then, you go through your challenge matches, and you you kind of, eye-opening event, and even
Yeah.
this most recent story that you tell. Listen, like, it all happens. There's this tragedy that takes place on your wife's side, and that's very difficult moments in our life, and yet somehow that's overshadowed in a sense with this bright moments of, hey, I have this opportunity. And it all boils down to this very simple moment that like, damn it, like, you get to do this. And people would give up everything to be in your position for a day, forget about doing this for living. So I don't know. I have a hard time not to ask that question. Do you believe this is all happened for a reason, or you are truly like the luckiest cat in the world?
I think in that way, yeah, I think it's happened for a reason, and the reason is so that I can continue to share Rickson's beautiful jiu-jitsu with the ones that need it the most. And I'll teach the athletes too. They're harder to teach because they don't have the same necessity to learn all these details. They can just use oomph. But yeah, I think this all coming together has all of the path of my life, the darkness and the light and the moving around and everything has all trained me to be the best teacher that I can be, I think. And getting to interact with so many different people and so many different learning styles and so many different shapes and sizes and personalities and such, and practicing being able to get through, especially to the ones that just aren't getting it. And they're so easy to overlook and say, oh, you'll get it with practice, or next time or after class, let's talk about it, or whatever, and those are the ones like, I really want to be able to help every single person understand conceptually and fundamentally these smallest number of moves possible to know to stay safe. And then you add on moves beyond that as you like. Sometimes I think about it as building like a role-playing character, like a Dungeons and Dragons game or something, where you have your 10 points that you can put into strength and dexterity and wisdom and charisma and all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, I need to put a baseline point in all of them just to get fundamentally down. And then, okay, I can put the rest wherever you want. Just go learn all the birimbolos and flying arm bars, and or learn the spinning jump kicks or whatever the stuff. Knife throwing. I love knife throwing and axe throwing. I put a lot of time into that. Not that it'll ever be useful to me, I'm sure, but it's fun, and I put some of my skill points in there. but I maintain those fundamentals.
Before we start wrapping this up, we've been at this for over an hour, but before we start wrapping this up, I do have to ask you this. And I wrote this down before we start in this conversation. Rickson Gracie, one of the best, one of the pioneers. Also a very unique mind as far as the teaching is concerned. The ability of relay information, and I've watched plenty of videos with him, and this is not just my opinion, but everybody. The ability to relay the information that's inside his mind to other people with the simplicity of the language and the way how he does it. Now he teaches this to you. And now that torch has been passed on, now you have the opportunity to teach this. Do you feel that those are big shoes to fill?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And, a lot of like when he's teaching his lessons here and I'm assisting, a lot of it is just me watching him teach and learning which words does he use, what kind of pressure and resistance does he give someone? This person's not getting it. How does he rephrase it? Does he even continue speaking, or does he move straight into tactile kind of instruction? Learning how he teaches is a big part of what I'm doing right now, as well as sharpening my understanding of his invisible techniques and stuff too. I think I forgot your question now.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, big shoes to fill, because a lot of these guys that have been coming and taking lessons with him, one day maybe they'll be taking lessons with me or with Jack or Chris or with Henry or whoever, and we are going to obviously wonder, does this feel like it did when Rickson was teaching you? But I think as long as the student is able to assimilate and incorporate the technique into their system in a relatively quick and painless way, I think those shoes will be filled. And if we can sprinkle in some maybe well-timed and meaningful life advice that maybe has jiu-jitsu concepts in it during that, great. I don't know about you, but over the course of my time teaching, especially private lessons, a lot of those turn into little like therapy sessions where people just kind of want to talk a bit, and could be about jiu-jitsu, could be not about jiu-jitsu. And so having heard Rickson have these conversations, it just gives me more fuel to maybe say something that impacts a student in a way that's really special for them or powerful, not just with the conveying of jiu-jitsu techniques, but have you ever seen this breathing technique? Or, man, that deal with your wife sounds pretty rough. Have you thought about the timing that you use to bring that up with her? Or what kind of connection do you have with nature these days? Are you spending a lot of time with light shining in your eyes and indoors and stuff? And how can we maybe apply some leverage to this business problem that you're having right now? And just applying jiu-jitsu to life through these concepts that Rickson holds dear, and the invisible pieces of jiu-jitsu and the invisible pieces of life. He talks all the time about these days. Sometimes the problem that we have to deal with, it's not an armbar, it's like an email that we get. It's like, the guy says he's going to shut your business down, he's suing you, and you're like, fuck, and I don't know about you, but I think we tend to sometimes, in that state of fight or flight that we can find ourselves in, we can make dumb decisions and stuff. But just taking a moment to breathe and move at the same time. He talks a lot about this with a lot of people that come to see us, and the breath, such a powerful tool in so many different ways to use it, so many different techniques to heat yourself up or cool yourself down or excite yourself or mellow yourself out or cause a bunch of stress or create a bunch of euphoria. It's amazing what you can do with your breath. And it's also amazing that this is something that happens automatically, whether we think about it or not. And also we can control it. What other thing do we have control over like that? It's a very interesting piece of our physiology, the breath, and very powerful. And I think it's, Rickson, I think, has said many times, is one of, if not the biggest pieces of his success, is his mastery of breath.
If there is one lesson that you took away from this entire jiu-jitsu experience, especially with hanging out with Grandmaster, what would it be?
One lesson to take away. I guess it would be to be humble. Be strong, but be humble is the lesson that I take away from all of my training with him. But I think my favorite advice that he ever gave me, that his father gave him, was be patient, not passive. And, that's, I think, referring to rolling in jiu-jitsu and not letting opportunities fly by, but being prepared for them, being prepared for those mistakes. But this applies to our everyday life as well. Patiently waiting for the right moment, not passively letting them pass by.
Very much so. Very much so. James, I can't say I thank you enough for being here for last hour and 20 minutes. Arguably,
Nice.
This might be one of the longer conversations I've had on this show, but I could talk for another hour with you, but I want to be respectful of your time.
That was great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, you're sharing your life, being vulnerable, some of those, dark moments in your life, and being so and celebrating some of the great stuff, because ultimately I do believe that's what life is all about, is us.
It's beautiful.
It's such a beautiful moment. And like I said earlier, I think the only certainty in life is the fact that, there is the end to it at some point. And, appreciating what we have and people that we have around us is really, really important. If anybody wants to follow up with you, connect with you, perhaps even take private lessons, or, talk about life as a follow-up to this amazing conversation, where can you be found? Social media, websites, where are you at, James?
I don't do too much of that kind of stuff, but I'm trying to be more involved on my Instagram and trying to post more stuff. People are always asking me to make techniques and make videos and stuff, workouts or whatever. And I'm trying to do more, but it doesn't come naturally to me. But they can reach out to me on Instagram, and I'm happy to chat. Anybody has any jiu-jitsu questions or just wants to shoot the shit or whatever, that's totally cool. And then come to Vero Beach and take a lesson with me and the Grandmaster.
I will make sure to post all the links in the show notes, guys. And if I highly encourage you to talk to James. I mean, it's such a unique opportunity that he had in his entire life, and many of us, dream about this stuff. And it's cool stuff. It's cool stuff. James, you are a kill cat, and I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you talking to me. As always, I'll be sitting on the sidelines and just watch you do all the amazing stuff as you have. Thank you for being on the show. Let's wrap this up for today.
All right. See you, brother.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.